Right, so let's try out this glitch sort of thing then. Let's type in will road to Hokkaido go viral, sort of ask Google Translate a question. It seems to answer people quite a lot with some very weird answers indeed. Let's split it up a bit and change it a bit. Maybe take off the L and that's a good answer indeed. Hi guys, I'm ghostofmessalla and welcome back to a very different video, which is this video will have no sort of clickbait. It's not going to have any scary music or background in some of these other conspiracy theory videos that you see. What it is the Google Translate conspiracy theory. Now this might just seem like I just made this up randomly, but it's an actual thing. There's been lots of videos made on this, but none actually looking into why it happened. So basically, the conspiracy, what happens is people type in weird things into Google Translate, and they translate into things that they should never translate to. So, for example, you type in for the first example of this, you type in a string of 3 letters. You just type in 3 letters space, 3 letters space, 3 letters space, and you get something really weird like blood or something like that. I'm guessing I'm showing some examples on screen right now of these weird translations, and these translations shouldn't be what happens. They don't translate back into the language. If you click on the thing and look down, it's not what they should translate into. So why does this happen? And there's been lots of theories as to why this happens. There's like stuff like well, it could be like a code for the Americans. They could be using Google Translate as a code to communicate with other people. It could be an AI, so Google have for some reason put an AI into Google Translate. It keeps coming up with these weird creepy things that you see on the internet that are sort of like, you know, people asking questions and you get really weird answers like, or it could be even be not creepy, but it could be an unintentional, it could be a privacy issue, and it could be that you typed in some random sort of letters and stuff. Google Translate comes back and it's like, hey, here's some random person's email address for no reason, and I'm going to have a look into it today. So there's 2 sorts of glitches within Google Translate. I'll be looking at one of them in this video, but I'll explain both of them while I'm here. So the first one is the Somali glitch, named after the language that this glitch occurs in. Well, I've self-named these, so they're not the official names. There's not really any official names, but so basically this is if you type in 2 to 3 letter words. They can be anything, separated by spaces. So as you can probably see on the screen, I've typed in some questions and then separated them into 3 or 2 letter chunks, and they produce strange things. In particular, questions seem to get answers. So like basically you'd ask how are you, and it would say do not ask that, or something like that. And it's strange stuff. This is where all of the conspiracy theories derive from, is on this particular glitch itself. You know, is it a code because it's only 3 or 2 letters long? So it's sort of like, you know, sort of like Morse code, or sort of like that. There's lots of ciphers that work like that, so they're right to be a code. And this glitch also happens in other languages such as Hawaiian and Kurdish. It might happen in other languages too, but I'm focusing on Somali in this episode. Then we have the second glitch, which I have called the duplication glitch, and this one is very different. It can work in any language at all. Maybe English, I'm not sure about English, might not work in that, but basically you type in a 2 or 3 letter word and then just type it over and over and over again, and you'll get some weird stuff. This one is less clear, like it won't answer questions for you, of course, because you're typing in something and then duplicating it a load of times. This is more of a comedy one. You see people doing this for comedic value, sort of like, you know, type in a load of stuff and then make a funny video about it, it could actually be, this is more likely to be a privacy issue. I've seen web links come up, I've seen sort of random stuff from websites come up, you know, like the bars down the side that says please enter your username and email. I've seen like stuff like please enter your username or nationalities or stuff like that. But what I'll be in this video, I'll be looking at the Somali glitch only. So firstly, I'm going to ask some questions about it. Is it taking data from web pages? So I googled something obscure to start off with, which is Ghost of Messalla, which legendary bird are you? Scratch, which is one of my old Scratch games that I made like 3 years ago. Of course, I know that there's only like 4 results for this. I'll show a picture on screen, and yeah, so there's only 4 true results for this. All the others are sort of miscellaneous, and I used Google for this, of course. So I did the Somali glitch 4 times in 4 different ways. So what I did first of all was split up the phrase that I just said earlier into 2 letters, and the result was like a ghost of mess followed by some sort of gibberish and stuff, lots of H's in there. It was very weird indeed. And then I did it again and added a question mark, and it was even more random stuff. It just basically the same, but the question mark changed it quite significantly. And okay. And then I split it into 3 letters, and what it came up with was so this is translation. This is not what it translates into, by the way, because it works with anything. And I'll come back to that later. But it translated into "you are currently browsing the page you are browsing." Now that suggests that it's come from a web page, but it changes with the question mark. So it changes once you add a question mark. Just this one punctuation note is, are you sure you know what you are doing here? Just this one question mark changes it from that to just something completely different. So I had a look for all of these in the Google search for Ghost of Messalla, which legendary bird are you, Scratch, and it didn't come up. So none of these phrases were in any of those web pages. So we can assume that it is not taking data from web pages, so that rules out that. It could be taking data from web pages of any kind, but I'll come back to that in a bit. So on to the next theory. And did you notice how much the question mark, it changed the response drastically from like one phrase to a completely different one? So it could sort of, if you jump a bit, it could sort of be seen as a sort of over, you know, like how in films they're like talking to someone over, and then it signifies that it's time for another person to talk. This question mark could be like that. It's just signaling that it is a code, sort of. So if you add the question mark on the end, it becomes a code and becomes an actual message. So I had a look into that theory. And yeah, so also certain 3-letter strings seem to have a big effect. So I've got a video up on screen now. No matter which football player I put into this, it always comes up with the same thing. So it's clearly some strings are having more of an effect than others. But random combinations don't work. So if you just type in a load of random letters with no vowels, it just won't work. It won't translate, which is kind of strange, but I'll come back to why that's strange in a bit. But here's where it gets a bit weird. It works in Spanish, which has non-English characters. It works in Turkish, which has more non-English characters. So like the weird O and the G and the C with the thing underneath it. Not sure of the technical names for that. It even works with Polish, which has almost no vowels in it, but it does have some vowels. And it took me quite a while to get Polish to work, but it did eventually. But I had to have vowels in it. So it seems that vowels make the things translate. So if you put a vowel in there, it will translate. If you don't have a vowel, it won't. So therefore, it might not be a code, as coders code makers often use random strings of text. So you might have seen, like in your password, is not supposed to be a word or phrase, and people who make codes don't use just words or phrases because they're easier to crack. You know, you see a word or phrase, you know what they're talking about. Also, numbers don't work in Google Translate, and numbers are a massive part of coding. So if you don't have numbers, then you don't have a crucial element into code itself. Finally, even text like Cyrillic works. So if you don't know what Cyrillic is, it is the Russian language. It's a Russian text. So you know how we here have like ABC. In Russian they have a whole different alphabet, and text in Cyrillic work. If you wanted to code in Cyrillic, it would involve buying a different keyboard. So you could potentially do that, but you'd have to speak a different language. You have to be able to read Cyrillic, and yeah, so it would not just be speaking a different language or learning different characters, you know, copy and paste. You have to buy a whole different keyboard. However, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because Cyrillic is structured similarly to Latin, but with other languages that are not structured similarly to Latin, like Chinese. So Chinese is very different, because I'm not going to explain why in the video, but it's very different, and nothing happened. So no matter what I did, I couldn't get Chinese to work in the glitch, and for the glitch to come up with anything. So yeah, it was quite interesting had that happened. So I'm going to rule out the code for now. It just doesn't seem likely that a group would use Google Translate to code something. So is it just an AI developing consciousness, or just an AI, just like a Google developing an AI? I don't think so, because the same phrase comes up way too much. So like, what are you doing here, or how are you, comes up way too much. And with an AI, like in serial stuff, it's programmed to have loads of different responses, but it just doesn't seem to work. It could be some sort of really weird practice that just went wrong, but 99% of the time it just had nothing to do with what you say either. And also, why, I just don't understand why you would do that again. Why Google would test an AI within their Google Translate function. So what is it then? So basically, Somali isn't a widely spoken language. You've probably never heard of it before. I've talked about this video. Only 16 million people speak Somali, and add to that the fact that only 1.7% of people in Somalia have internet access. Not many people are going to translate Somali. This means that not a lot of people check it. So if you translate a lot of things a lot of time on Google Translate, you've got a little button below it that says, can you check this? Check this is right, and then you can type in what is actually the right thing. So with a language like Spanish, you're going to have a lot of Spanish speakers, so you have a lot of people to check whether it's right or not. But like Somali, you're not going to have a lot of people to check that, as for the reasons I just stated. 1.7% of people living in Somalia have internet access, not a lot. But this means that trolls, people who just type in like these weird translations like how are you or stuff like that, or blood or pain or something, couldn't get that to come up, but apparently it does. Can get away with it because people aren't checking it and verifying that it's the correct translation. I don't think that people's private email conversations come into it, as translations seem quite similar. There's no real difference between certain translations. They all are structured in the same way, which is not like an email most of the time. Sometimes they get a bit weird, but again, it's probably due to certain phrases. And I don't think Google searching, it just, with the duplication glitch that I talked about earlier, it's pretty clear that it's to do with Google searching in some way. Of course, I'll come back to that in a different video. This is not the same. It's just answering questions basically. There's no real links, no massive corruption of text that I see. I think the corruption of text that I saw earlier on was just an actual translation or something like that. I'm not sure, but it didn't seem like. It doesn't come up with strange stuff like in bars down the side enough. But yeah, so basically I just think it's people typing in stuff randomly. Leave a like if you want a part. So thanks for listening, guys. Leave a like if you want a part 2 to this. This took me a very long time to do, but I think I've got an answer to it now. It sounds quite complicated. If you have any questions, of course, ask them in the comment section. I'll be happy to help you. It's a bit different, but oh well, I was interested in it and I wanted to research it, so I thought, why not make it into a YouTube video? And there'll be a Honchu challenge on Wednesday, the last one, and links to stuff that I used in the description. And yeah, so